paths, and hopefully there is some overlap that we cooperate on. I think the second issue is as also pointed out, it is a bit early, okay? And if you looked 5 years ago and said, let's pick one technology and focus on that technology, it probably was the wrong one. So until some of these technologies shake out, until a lot of these large-scale projects go into commercial operation, until you let the private sector in cooperation with government support let these things play out, it's hard to actually pick a winner right now. And probably 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, maybe none of these technologies were the best. Maybe there's another technology that grows out of one of these that becomes the next technology. So I think there's a risk in focusing just on one. Now, at government, in government funded programs, maybe they decide they don't have enough funds to look at 5 or 6 different technologies and decide they're going to focus on 1 or 2. That probably makes sense.
I'd like to just add that, I think if you look around at what technology is being built the most today, it's oil trough technology. And I don't think there are many people in this room that would say that's the best technology. So sometimes other factors drive which technologies actually get built. And it would be very risky to presume that we could answer that question and with the right solution that all the different elements of a project would agree to.
I would just add that maybe the PV is a perfect example how the competition of various technology approaches led to that overall success of PV industry coming down with cost. And if I take a look at CSP, I think we should accelerate the innovation cycles. And there CSP has a disadvantage because it takes quite a long time for a new technology to get really into the market. So I think really to help CSP drive costs down should be the opposite, make it really wide, open it up, and allow new technologies to prove their competitiveness in the market.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff, for your question. Microphone 2.
Yeah. My name is Mark Benmaraz from Sola Euromed. I have a question to all of you guys related to your strategies of the deployment of your technologies. Deployment is one of the drivers to augmenting the capacity and reducing the cost. The deployment is going to happen not only in the countries where the incentives are, but to the countries where the DNI exists, okay? And these countries are mostly the Sun Belt, and these countries are mostly developing countries. And my question is related to how you intend to face the challenges of those countries where I could simplify saying that they are characterized by 1, limited technical skills, 2, aggressive site environment, okay? And also needs which are not limited to electricity. Those countries are needing electricity. Sometimes they have isolated networks. Sometimes they need water. There is a need to produce water, to enhance agriculture, etc. So what are your intentions and strategies related to that?
I've got a couple thoughts on deployment as a broad category. One of the pictures I showed of our simplicity slide was using just simple hand tools, right? You can't build a tall receiver in the desert with just hand tools, but where possible in the solar field, to your point, we can simplify and make it easy for unskilled labor in remote locations to be utilized. Not universally so, but those are the kinds of things that I see. I also have seen several bid activities and discussions going on in some other countries relative to hybridization. Can these plants or a couple different technologies coexist at a site for electricity and desal, for example? So that's a higher level technology answer. It may be that that's a way to get started in some of those markets. Whether or not we can actually make parts and localize and the industries are all set up around the world, that will take time, but again, back to how we design those parts is critical. I've heard several conversations today, yesterday as well, around how difficult it is to get materials to site, to have them survive in some of the MENA regions. So this notion of how do we test for dust, salt, corrosion, those kinds of things, I think those are some standards that we're going to have to keep developing. How do we do life testing? We're early here. We have 30-year-old plants we want to have, yet how do we know that these systems are going to be durable after 30 years? So a lot of work, I think, can be done in terms of overstress testing and maybe some standard setting work that we can do together on how to go about doing that.
I think, I think your question is probably a more of a definition of how the CSP industry survives. If you look now, the nice, safe, easy, theoretically easy. Most of the places I've had political risk problems have been the U.S. actually, but aside from that, but the CSP markets, the easier markets, or what people thought were the easier markets of U.S. and Europe, aren't really going to be able to support these technologies. So you're exactly right. We're going into more challenging markets, more challenging from political issues, more challenging from environments, more challenging from financing activities, more challenging from the requirements of government, okay? I mean, you build a project in California, and while I think they should be asking for local content issues, they really don't, okay? I think our experience in South Africa was valuable to us as an organization because the scoring was based on a whole lot of other issues. Local financing requirements, local partner requirements, all those kinds of things. And I think that's key is to going in those markets. Number one is local partners and getting a good understanding of what it takes to develop a project in Saudi Arabia or Ghana or South Africa or Chile or wherever. And I think that's really going to be the key because if we look at the markets that exist now for CSP, it's those markets. Okay, and it's going to have to be understanding of the local requirements, bringing in good local partners, and financing structures that are not only local financing structures, but Exim Bank, World Bank kind of financing activities. So that level of development expertise is really going to drive this industry as we go forward.
Yeah, I might add from a quality point of view, I think it's you can be safe if you have a fully automated manufacturing process covering all critical process steps which are dealing with geometrical accuracy and so on. So that is a safe thing to have if you go into new markets. And secondly, I think it's unavoidable to really become part of that country and hire people and train them well in advance to have really a capable team, which is then able to assemble these prefabricated elements. I think it's manageable. It's not something you can do overnight, and that's why we are focused on target markets, where we have, enough time ahead to prepare and do the necessary training. And then I think we can deliver the same quality as we delivered in Spain, everywhere.
Let me just add, I think maybe one of the reports you're referring to is the UK Carbon Trust report on small-scale CSP, which went through a very detailed analysis on applications for combined heat and power, off-grid electricity and steam requirements on industrial process in a lot of these emerging and developing countries, very clearly laying out what those challenges are. I think that by definition, this is an area where government labs, whether it's the DOE's lab or other labs, have a significant role to play, whether it's in the material testing and the education or standardization, but also helping these other folks to understand what the requirements are to ensure that success. So yes, we have large scale, very efficient, driving down cost of electricity, but it's these other applications, I think, that represent really a tremendous growth opportunity for the industry.
All right, I think we have time for one more quick question. The gentleman at microphone 3.
And I'd like to apologize to the panel for my question, especially, I'm Yoel Gilon from Brightsource, but I believe, Joe, you'll excuse me, you can answer. But I didn't hear number. There was an excellent panel on value, which is helping. There is Sancho telling us what to do. I didn't hear how and if. I heard on the various projects, more or less, we all know what was the rate on those projects. So maybe you can say, with this cost reduction, can we achieve this the sunshot? The value is maybe helping, but please, it will be nice to have numbers.
I'll throw out a few numbers. I think if you look at most of the projects that have been built in the U.S. are kind of in the low teens cents per kilowatt hour number, 12, 13, 14 cents a kilowatt hour number, and that includes the tax credit structure. If you look at where PV is being bid right now, we're bidding it in the U.S., so we're bidding 7.5 cents and losing in the U.S. On some of our PV projects. So the PV, if we're being held to the PV standard, you're looking at taking our low teens pricing in a U.S. market, and that's in that tax credit market, from a low teens market down into the kind of 7, 8, 9 cents range, okay? I mean, obviously one of the differentiators is storage. You have to have storage, okay? Because otherwise we're not going to be able to get down to the 6 cent range competing with PV. We have to differentiate ourselves from PV and look at our cost comparison to natural gas, coal, and nuclear, okay? And right now at 11, 12 cents a kilowatt hour, I would argue that we're more cost effective than nuclear and coal, but you need storage in order to be able to compete with those technologies. And depending on what you look at for natural gas prices, here in the U.S., very low, internationally not so low, we can compete with natural gas. But that means that we got to continue to bring our costs down. We have to differentiate ourselves from PV because we're not going to get down to 6 or 7 cents. It's just not going to happen. You put that in international structure, and the international requirements are much more storage based. Okay, they can only afford so much intermittent energy from wind and solar, and wind prices, quite frankly, in the U.S. are probably in the, I mean, there's power contracts that have been signed in the 3 to 4 cent range in wind in the U.S. But highly intermittent. So the key is going to be storage, and I think that our prices in the U.S. need to get under 10 cents a kilowatt hour, or we're not going to survive.
I guess I would say, in the end, we're not going to be able to compete directly with PV for any time in the near future, or if ever. So I don't think we're competing for the same marketplace. I think utilities and countries will put as much PV on their system as they can, and at some point they'll hit a limit, and then there's room for CSP. In general, I think we're looking for a 50% reduction in CSP costs. Unfortunately, our incentives are going to probably start going away, and so that's not going from 12 cents to 6 cents, but probably 12 cents to 9 cents. So I think we have a challenge ahead of us, and I think this is a really important part. I think the technology is an important part of that, but we also have to stop having an environment where virtually every plant is a custom designed plant in a new place with new requirements, and we have to find a way to develop multiple plants. I think when I joined Ebb and Go a number of years ago, I was a big proponent of big CSP projects, and I thought it was crazy that we were building 50 megawatt trough projects in Spain, but after building 13 of those, I have a different opinion that there's a real advantage to being able to build, the same design over and over. I think there's a lot of improvements there. The environment in Spain is much different. It's less onerous in terms of permitting, and so there are a lot of ways that can help us drive these costs down. Technology won't get us there on its own.
I offered some specific numbers about cost reduction per year or on new technology, and if you look at that and look at the Sunshot goals, I'm talking about cost per meter squared here of the solar field here. So I think that's achievable, the Sunshot goals, although I'm not quite sure what that definition in Sunshot actually is of what is in that cost exactly. So my general statement is we can make dramatic, big double-digit reduction gains. It requires volume, some standardization, requires the vendor base to stop being so skittish about our crazy choppy revenue stream for them. But I think those goals are real, with the caveat that I think our definitions aren't quite so clear yet. But I think that's possible.
All right, I tried to explain to us the competition is more to compare against fossil fuels than against PV. And we think that we can come up with a CSP technology which is able to, compete against fossil fuels or provide significantly cheaper steam than you would be able to generate with fossil fuels in many markets. And I trust that the power plant engineers would be able to, turn this advantage into, electricity cost, which should be, again, more competitive than fossil fuel generated power in those markets.
Well, I don't know if you were, this is certainly not a softball question, so thank you for that. I think I had mentioned we see a path in the Sunshot process for the solar field to get to that $75 per square meter within the next several years. But that aside, I just want to emphasize a few of the other points made here. One is on the value differentiation. We're not competing against PV. We're competing against alternative fossil fuels or other flexible generation. The importance of storage can't be underestimated. You heard probably on Wednesday or Tuesday of this week, Dr. Udi Hellman talk about what that value differential is, and the work that has been done by NREL and many others trying to quantify those categories of value. I think rather than waiting until we see markets become saturated with PV before people wake up and say, boy, we have a problem managing our grid, we're trying to get out ahead of that issue and educate as much as possible. Educate people who operate the power grid system by identifying how quickly these problems creep up, by quantifying what those costs and impacts are, and then also by helping them to understand and really anticipate the problem. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, having gone through sort of that exercise, coming up with an allocation that says, it's going to be 50% CSP and maybe a balance of PV and others. So I think they're all things, but the notion of us versus PV, I don't think is today, at least for us, where we see ourselves competing. It's more against the fossil fuels and alternatives for maintaining that grid reliability.
Yul, thanks for your question. Please join me in thanking the panel for talking today. Thank you all for the questions from the audience and your attention. I think the coffee break is the next item on the agenda. Thank you. Same thing.